Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Just so everybody is aware, this is being recorded. Let me go ahead and get everybody set here. We have a couple other people that are being admitted right now, so I apologize for the delay. All right, so okay, perfect. That's all set now. So good afternoon, Happy New Year, and welcome to the Chamber's first membership meeting of 2021. Today's program will be our annual State of the County program. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge and welcome Umpqua Orthopedics as a new member of the Roseburg Chamber. Please check out this new member's services online. Today's membership meeting program is possible through the generosity of our member sponsor, Avista Utilities. We would like to thank Avista Utilities for its longtime support of the Chamber and specifically our January program. Avista Utilities and its predecessors have continuously served the energy and heating needs of Roseburg since 1911. More than a century ago, Oregon Electric and Gas Company built a manufactured gas plant on the west side of the railroad tracks at Stevens and Diamond Lake Boulevard. For half a century, local patriarchs such as L. Sutter and C.H. Loveland, followed by Southern Oregon Gas Corporation, produced manufactured gas used to heat homes, businesses, and generate process heat for local industry. For as many as 30 years, CP National brought propane in by rail to serve the community through local underground pipelines before selling the business to Suburban in the late 1970s. In the early 1960s, the interstate pipeline north of Vancouver, BC was built down the I-5 corridor to Southern Oregon, bringing natural gas to local communities. In 1991, CP National was sold to Washington Water Power, locally branded as WP Natural Gas, followed by a name change to Avista in the late 1990s. More than 100 years later, the growth of major industries and some of the largest employers in Douglas County can be largely attributed to affordable and reliable clean burning natural gas. Thank you to Steve Vincent, Jeff Schwender, and all the folks at Avista for your longstanding service to Douglas County. Today, the Chamber is pleased to host its annual State of the County, where we'll get a brief recap of the truly wondrous year that was 2020 and provide some insight on future county goals and activities. To present this year's address will be the Honorable Chris Boyce, Douglas County Commissioner, who served as chair of the Board of Commissioners in 2020. As most of you know, Commissioner Boyce has served Douglas County as a county commissioner since 2015 and is currently midway through his second term as a Douglas County Commissioner. Chris has owned and operated a small business in Roseburg since 2002. He became involved in public service in order to give back to his community. Commissioner Boyce is the county's lead for economic development activities, and some of his current liaison assignments include CCD Business Development Corporation Board Member, Coos Curry Douglas Consortium Board Member, Regional Solutions South Coast Umpqua Advisory Committee, and several committees of the Association of Oregon Counties, to name a few. Just a reminder, please submit your questions for Commissioner Boyce in the chat, and after the completion of his presentation, present each of the questions aloud for all our virtual attendees to hear. With that, it is my privilege to welcome Commissioner Chris Boyce.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me, and welcome to our virtual State of the County address this year. I'm going to do it just a little different than we have done in years past. I just want to first make sure everyone can hear me okay. Alan, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. And, you know, in years past, we've taken quite a bit of time to go through and sort of provide updates for what all the county departments have done. Obviously, 2020 has been a little bit of a challenging year in a bunch of different ways. So I'm going to give a few updates that I think are important highlights from the county. But more importantly, I want to leave lots of times for questions and answers today. You know, we've been involved in some significant events in 2020. Those include, obviously, the response to the coronavirus.
Oh, Chris, I apologize. Somehow we got you muted there.
I think you muted me, Alan.
Oh, sorry about that.
I told you to mute me after 10 minutes, not after. Just teasing. But we had a series of wildfires in Douglas County, primarily the Archie Creek fire, which resulted in the loss of many homes in the Glide area that we'll talk about as well. But again, I want to leave lots of time for questions and answers. I'm sure there's a lot of people wondering what the county's response has been, what we have done, what we're doing, what our plans for the future are, and all of those things. So let me just get started. Again, I'm going to keep it pretty short, primarily because 2020 wasn't a very good year, and I really don't want it to linger any longer. So I'm going to start with the Parks Department. We had some major important projects that we were able to finish in the Parks Department this year. We had over 42,000 camping nights in 2020, even with the various shutdowns that we had throughout the year. But more importantly, we completed the Umpqua Dunes Campground South Loop remodel, which is a campground that we purchased. Sort of little controversial. Some folks didn't think that was the right move, but it's turned out to far exceed our expectations as far as revenue in the Parks Department. The purchase of that campground and the remodel of it is going to be significant towards our ability to, at some point in the near future, eliminate day use parking fees. It's providing a tremendous amount of revenue into the department. It was a great acquisition for us, and we have 2 more phases of remodel to do over there, but we completed the first phase and it's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, go see it. The other thing is new play equipment down at Chief Miwalita Park. That's down in Galesville Reservoir. And then we completed the remodel of the Windy Cove B campground over at the Coast 2 with new asphalt, new 50 amp services. There's going with sort of a theme over there that's tying everything together with the lighthouse. So when you look at the new restrooms that are at Windy Cove and you look at the pedestals that we put in there, it's all sort of themed around the lighthouse. So take a trip over to the coast, take a look at that. It's fantastic. At Salmon Harbor over there, we were successful in working with the Port of Umpqua, which the county used to manage Salmon Harbor under an intergovernmental agreement between Douglas County and the Port of Umpqua. And the Port of Umpqua and Douglas County felt like it was going to be appropriate to finally terminate that agreement and give control of management of that facility directly to the county. That just reduced some bureaucratic red tape and gave us a more streamlined approach of being able to make decisions and changes over there. And so far it's been good. And with that, we were able to complete the expansion of the RV resort over there. We added on the end of the spit where the RV resort is, we added another 40 campsites over there. That's going to help get people. We had a lot of complaints from folks from Douglas County not being able to get into that campground. That's going to help that. And then we also just signed an agreement to start a new online reservation system over there. So we're heavily invested in the coastal community, and we made some great changes over there. I encourage you guys all to go see them. As you know, in Douglas County, we harvest trees. The county has a harvest program where we manage some of our own timberlands. And in 2020, we harvested about 2.6 million board feet. And we just acquired 120,000 seedlings to replant on about 300 acres of timberland in Douglas County. Our management and finance department does so much for us. Everything that every other department does is dependent upon them in order to keep us within our budgets and so on. I can't thank them for the work that they do enough. This is no new accomplishment for them, but I like to mention it every year. They received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Finance Officers Association for their comprehensive annual financial report. We call that the CAFR. I don't know how many years in a row it's been. It's probably been 30 years in a row that they've done that. It makes it sort of seem routine, but it certainly isn't. There's a lot of work that goes into doing work and maintaining it at that level, and we're grateful for that. The Veterans Department, the highlight this year was actually inspired by COVID, and I love the community's innovative approach to trying to manage through some of these issues, and the Veterans Department's no different. Their reverse Veterans Day parade was probably one of my highlights of the year, where folks are really discouraged about having to do things like cancel the fair and music on the half shell and all the things that Roseburg is known for and Douglas County is known for. And the Veterans Day parade is on that list. So the innovative approach to do the reverse Veterans Day parade, where the all the floats were sort of set up stationary and people in the public could drive through. It was absolutely fantastic. And we continue to support veterans in Douglas County. And I'm going to move on to the museum. Some great things happening with the museum. There's too many things to list, but a few highlights again. This last year, they opened their second phase of the Ancient Oregon exhibit. If you haven't gone over there to see that, you need to. I think the museum is one of the least visited places by people that live in Douglas County, but one of the most visited places by people who don't live in Douglas County. They also took the old maintenance shop that was up at the lighthouse that was used for parks maintenance building, and just on their own time with volunteers and a very slim budget, transitioned that into a gift shop of all gift shops. It's wonderful. If you haven't been there, you need to go check it out. The work that they did in there is absolutely amazing. And after they opened the new gift shop, they've got some vending that happens there with some food and drink items as well. They transitioned the old gift shop, which was in the bottom of the museum building, to an art gallery, which is fantastic also. So here's some interesting things about the lighthouse that probably some of you folks didn't even know existed. They were awarded being one of the top 10 travel destinations in the world for 2020 by TripAdvisor. Now, I don't know if TripAdvisor knows about everything that there is to go see in the world, but I'm going to guess that because the Douglas County Museum was in the top 10 of that list, that's a fairly significant accomplishment. And I'm grateful for the folks out there that do that work. Many of them are volunteers, and Douglas County Museum really has become something to be proud of. They were also awarded the number 2 in the state of Oregon for 100 best destinations in Oregon. And I know we've made that list before, but being second on that list, considering all the wonderful things there are to see in the state of Oregon, is quite an accomplishment. Our county clerk's office this year was managed by the new guy, and he's no longer the new guy, but we had a vacancy in the clerk due to the resignation of Patty Hitt, and we thank her for her service, where the commissioners had to appoint an interim clerk, and we chose Dan Loomis, who is an individual who retired from the military, moved back to his home county, has just been eager to get involved and helped ever since. The challenge there was to try to appoint someone to that position that wanted to be there long term and can bring maybe some new perspective and also work with the experienced staff that's there now. And that was a difficult decision, but turns out to be the right one. This year, they managed 2 elections, one in May and one in November during a presidential election year. And because of motor voter, which some of you are probably most of you are familiar with, registered voters are up significantly. And Dan and his team down there do an absolutely fantastic job this year. And we're proud of them and the work that they did. And especially in an election year where voter fraud is a concern and people are concerned about election integrity. I can tell you that my experiences with Dan, there's not many folks that I would put on a list having higher integrity than him. And I'm very confident in the fact that the elections in Douglas County are very secure and that everyone's votes were counted appropriately. So we thank Dan and his team down there for doing that work. As you know, Douglas County has facilities all over the county, including buildings at the lighthouse, clear up the coast in the city of Reedsport and Scottsburg and just about everywhere in between. And we have a building facilities department that manages all of those facilities, and they do a wonderful job. The work that they do is extremely important, but it's also sort of boring to talk about. But their significant accomplishment for this year has to be our new Christmas tree. And we're grateful for that. We had decided that the cost of trying to bring in a Christmas tree every single year was just not worth the product that we were getting. And thanks to the crews that have done that work over the last few years, trust me when I say that it isn't easy to go out and find a Christmas tree that's going to make everyone happy and try to transplant it without breaking it and set it up and decorate it. It's just been a nightmare. And it seemed like planting a Christmas tree that could live year round in our front yard was the appropriate thing to do. And I gave that task to our new building facilities director, David Palmer, when he came on about a year and a half ago. And he came through right at the deadline before the Christmas season this year. And now we have a new live Christmas tree in our front yard. And some of you are wondering, we live in Douglas County, why didn't we put a Douglas fir tree in there? And it's a great question. We would have loved to have one, but Douglas fir trees, as you well know, grow to 200 to 300 feet tall. It's very difficult to decorate a 200 to 300 foot tall tree. And we're told that this tree grows to be 60 to 75 feet tall, and we're hoping that that holds true. So it is a Hazel Smith giant sequoia. It's got known for its sort of a bluish green color, and obviously it's perfectly shaped to be a Christmas tree, and we're grateful for it. It's a highlight of the building facilities this year. The next department I want to talk about is the building department. And among all of the wonderful things that they do, the highlight, which I'm not going to talk about all of them, the highlight for them this year was the fact that they maintained the lowest fees for building permits in the state of Oregon again this year without a fee increase since 2009. So they have worked very, very hard to keep their department very efficient. It is not dependent upon the general fund. It's completely supported by its fee structure. And they've kept the fees as low as possible and continue to do that great work. And I'm grateful for Bill and his team in the building department for doing that. I think that's just one thing that Douglas County does to try to encourage building and development in Douglas County. And we're grateful for the staff down there that do that work. I can't ever address the work that the county does without addressing the Sheriff's Department and how grateful we are for them and the work that they do. Their list is far too long to read, but I will just congratulate Sheriff Hanlon on his election to another term. The sheriff has positioned himself to be the longest serving sheriff in Douglas County, and we are grateful and lucky to have him. One thing I will mention about the Sheriff's Department this year is that, you know, we've gone through some significant changes in solid waste department in the last several years, including charging for fees. There's been a concern about rising instances of people dumping out in the woods and other places illegally. So we created a situation where we contract with the Sheriff's Department for a full-time deputy to go out and do that work. And he has been having some great success at busting and citing illegal dumpers. And we plan to share some success stories about that in the near future that may deter future people from wanting to do the same thing. And so with that, I'm going to talk about COVID here for just a minute. As you probably know, most of you and some of you don't, the Douglas County Board of Commissioners are the local public health authority in Douglas County. When Commissioner Freeman and I came to work here, Commissioner Freeman immediately went to work on sort of changing the county health department and the way that we do public health in Douglas County. And that is, in that transition, we retained the public health authority and we hired a public health officer and we contract with, through DPHN, Douglas Public Health Network, with multiple agencies in the community to provide the actual services. And they started doing some innovative things a few years ago, like drive-through flu shot clinics that have really positioned us well to respond to this pandemic. When the pandemic first started, the commissioners delegated authority to Commissioner Freeman really to be, as the public health liaison commissioner, to be in charge of the pandemic response. And he went out, of course, with our consent in that and put together the Douglas County COVID response team and brought together some of the greatest minds and workers from around the county into one team that really pre-planned and had contingencies, I guess, in place to deal with whichever direction the pandemic may have gone. And the work that they did was fantastic. I can't say enough about it. There's been a lot of talk about, the governor and her mandates and how to approach those things. Our position on that has been pro-business from the very beginning. We have felt like that enforcement forced people and forcing people into compliance was not the best route. So we've decided not to enforce those mandates, but rather to provide people with all of the right information and help them make choices that they feel like are best for them and their families. We've got a whole packet full of letters that we've sent out talking about our position on these issues. They're all available if anybody wants them. But aside from that, I can't thank them enough for the work that they did. And then in the middle of a pandemic, as if that wasn't enough, we had a horrific fire out in Glide. I've been involved in a lot of fire seasons, none of them as difficult as this one. We had about, I think the final tally was 109 families who lost their homes in Glide. And once again, as we've grown accustomed to in Douglas County, the community came together in a time of tragedy and did some things that no one really felt were possible. And within a matter of days, we had whole high school gymnasiums full of donated goods and things to help these folks in this tragic time. The community came together and got this work done, and I'm grateful for that. I'm going to leave the speech there for now, but I do want to take just a second and thank my fellow commissioners and tell all of you folks that are watching. I feel extremely fortunate to have the opportunity to be a county commissioner, but even more fortunate to have the opportunity to work with the two guys that I get to do this work with every day. Commissioner Freeman and Commissioner Kress both are here very early in the morning every day. They both beat me to work almost always. And they work extremely hard for you. We all three do. We don't always agree with each other on everything, but we do have a way of being able to come up with a solution that tends to work for everybody. And we're extremely grateful again to have the team that we have. And we hope that we're doing as good a job for you as you would expect. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there and open this up to questions. I'm assuming that there's probably some questions in the chat and I haven't had a chance to look yet. But if someone would like to help me with that, I can get to those right away.
Yeah, I'll go through those. We do have several questions. They show up to me directly, so I will.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Boyce. Okay, so the first question, so I'll piggyback a little bit on your last topic there as far as COVID. So the first question is going to be, when will the general public know more about when they can get the vaccination after the frontline and other essential people get the vaccine? Do we have an idea on that?
Yeah, so sure. Commissioner Freeman probably answered that question a little bit better than I can. And if I'm going to just tell you, we're getting daily updates. I got one today that sort of outlines what the order is. But as far as applying that order to the timeline, Commissioner Freeman will be able to speak to that better than I can. Since he's on here, I'm going to give him a chance to just answer that directly.
Thank you. I'll take all the easy questions and you can just do the hard ones. So can you guys hear me okay? So the short answer to that question is we don't know. I wish we did. The amount of vaccine that's coming to the county through public health is sort of unknown. We get 2 or 3 days of visibility is all we know. And then beyond that, we really don't know how much and how quick. But I can tell you, DPHN, Dr. Dannenhofer, working with all the healthcare partners in our community, have a tremendously well thought out and ready to execute plan for distributing vaccines when we get them. I know last week we had a couple hundred to do the 1A folks, which is really the healthcare workers. They're not hospital employees. And of course, all those vaccines got administered. They got some more at the end of last week. The plan will have those administered quickly. And we're told we may get another 500 late this week. So hopefully they're ramping that up. But as you can imagine, when our goal is to vaccinate 80,000 people, getting 200 or 500 a shot isn't going to get it done. So I will tell you, one of the challenges we have, and it's a good challenge to have, is that because our case count is so low, we're not quite as high priority as other counties that have a lot more disease. So they're getting more vaccine before us. So the reason we're getting less vaccine is because there's less cases and less disease here. So which is actually a good thing. So stay tuned. The state continues to change the metrics. The federal government, some of you may know that there's going to be an administrative change, and that could change what the federal government sends out for their recommendations. And again, the state continues to hone in and alter their plan. Most recently, we've heard that the National Guard may be part of the deployment plan for vaccines, but that's happening in real time and changing very quickly. That's a very long answer for not answering, but thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Freeman. And I'd just like to remind everyone, no questions are taboo. Anything that you've heard, have concerns about, this Board of Commissioners is very interested in getting factual information to folks any way that we can. So please don't hesitate to ask if you have any sort of a question or concern. Alan, what's next?
All right, next up, let's see here. Next up, we've got, do you think we'll see recycling back at the landfill and transfer stations anytime soon?
You know, we just got a approval from the DEQ to go back to recycling glass. Recycling is something that we've always wanted to do. Recycling is sort of a confusing topic to a lot of folks because it sort of makes sense from a philosophical standpoint. You know, everybody feels better about recycling and everybody wants to recycle. But the truth is, what a lot of people don't know about recycling is that it's a supply and demand driven market, just like everything else. It's also something that the government subsidizes to some degree in order to make possible. Without that, a lot of times recycling just wouldn't make financial sense. And I know that that frustrates some people, that things have to make financial sense in order to be considered feasible, but that's just the way it is. So the folks that have had recycling in their counties are doing it exactly that way. They build in money into their rate structure to help pay for the cost of recycling. And we've not done that here yet, really. And it's really just going to have to depend on what happens with the global market. And we assume that as technologies improve and new ways come along to process and manage recycled material, that it will pick up. The one thing that I can tell you, though, is the reason that we don't have recycling happening on a larger scale today in Douglas County is because we're not very good at it. When we have people that put bagfuls of diapers in the cardboard bin, it's those sorts of things that we literally dealt with on an almost daily basis that contaminated the recycled goods and made them not cost effective to be able to process. If you can imagine, if you had a clean bin of cardboard and you could take it to a recycling facility and they could put it into their process, how much easier that would be than if they had to pay someone or some technology to sort that cardboard to get the garbage out of it in order to process it. And that's literally what ruined the recycling market here. So part of that is on us. We got to get better at recycling. It's sort of confusing, you know, with all the different kinds of plastics and things and those getting intermingled together. That's really what was damaging the recycling market. And so part of that's going to have to be us being better recyclers. And then part of it's going to have to be a market developing for recycled goods to be able to have a use for those that makes them cost effective to be able to use.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so the next question is, I'm going to try to summarize a little bit. It's an excellently worded question, but there's a lot of parts to it. So, so a lot of businesses, most businesses, have been forced to lay off employees, reduce hours, and cut staff, and try to operate with less people and less resources. Some have lost jobs that maybe won't come back. What are some of the things that the county has had to do in terms of staff reductions, layoffs, program eliminations, that sort of thing, in order to lessen the financial burden?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think where that comes from is, you know, this idea that government workers aren't affected by this and that everybody continues to keep getting paid no matter what. And that certainly isn't the case at the county. You know, the very first thing that happened to Douglas County in the beginning of this pandemic is that we lost a considerable amount of our volunteer workforce. And we lost them because the majority of that work that's done, and there is a tremendous amount of work that's done for and in the county by volunteers, most of whom are of retirement age. They became the most susceptible to catch the virus and have a significant impact. And out of concern for their own health, a lot of those volunteers chose to not continue to do that work. And it's extremely important work, like delivering meals to other seniors who are shut in and can't get out and so on. So the very first thing that we did was we had some staff at the county that obviously wasn't able to perform their normal duty. Like, for example, staff out at the fairgrounds. We went from having events or multiple events every day to essentially no events. So we took some of those folks that were affected by the way that we do business, and we reassigned them to go do some of this important work. Initially, we had fairground staff, some public works staff, some of the assessor's office staff, all filling the shoes of volunteers that were no longer willing or able to do their work primarily in feeding seniors. So then we've laid off some staff. So we've had layoffs at the county as well in places like the fairgrounds where their departments can't do business as usual.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then, so I guess sort of, I had a question come in regarding the recycling. Following up on that, is there a plan for educating people on those recycling requirements to maybe get them better at it?
There is, and we've had, this is a challenging time to try to educate people, and it seems like it should be the other way. And what I mean by that is, there's so many different ways to get the word out anymore. We've got all these different social media platforms. We still have the old standbys of TV, radio, and newspaper. But the truth is that everyone chooses to get their information a different way. So the challenge for us is that we can't be everywhere all the time. And so recognizing this, the county hired a public information officer a while back, and we have made a valiant attempt to try to be able to communicate with the people in the county directly. And so I'm going to take a moment to ask you guys, if you haven't yet, sign up for our newsletter. It's our website is www.co.douglas.or.us. And I get that it's a little bit hard. And for those of you who didn't have a pen or pencil, I'll repeat it here again in a minute. But if you get to our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. Most everything that comes out in the media originates with RPIO. So we send out educational materials about recycling. We send out educational materials about COVID, and all of those things end up being printed in the local media. We have been educating people about how to recycle properly for years. Some folks have taken that very seriously. Some folks haven't, and some folks we just can't reach. So you could help us by signing up for our newsletter. You can share our information via social media once you get it, and that'll help us get the word out to all Douglas County citizens. And again, our website is www.co.douglas.or.us. Great question.
Thank you. So then assuming that the county is going to be entering budget meetings for the next fiscal year, what are, I guess, looking forward as far as changes you may need to make or things along those lines? Is there anything that you can share as far as that in the county's future?
Well, we're still 6 months away, or roughly 5 months away from the beginning of the next fiscal year. And we are just in a situation where we start that process of talking about the budget. And that process usually is the same every year. It sort of starts with a budget direction. We kind of take a look at what we have for resources, what the impact is from the actual impact from this last year, and provide the department heads with a direction. I don't expect that we'll see any significant changes. And the reason I say that is because we've sort of whittled things down here to the bare bones. And we sort of also got ourselves in a position where we have a capacity issue at the county. And if things were normal and we had just day-to-day operations, we'd be okay. But when we have UCC shootings, and we have wildfires every year, and we have snowmageddons, and we have COVID pandemics, we've sort of just learned that we're going to continue to have these things, and that we can't rely on just a normal everyday capacity. Now, we've had to build some capacity in order to manage this pandemic. And so if anything, I would expect that you might see a few changes in the budget that help us be better prepared to have the right amount of capacity when something like this would happen, whether that happens through contracts or, in other words, people who are on contract in order to respond when we need them, or whether that means a few key internal staff people. I think that would be something that you could expect to change. Otherwise, I wouldn't expect a lot of changes as far as next year's budget.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then does the county have a plan for long-term post-COVID recovery assistance for businesses?
We do. It's not just our plan. We're working on a plan that includes the Oregon State Chamber of Commerce, the local Chamber of Commerce, other state and local elected officials. It's not complete by any means. At this point, obviously, we're sort of trying to figure out exactly how and when this is going to end. We do know, though, that some of the things that need to be addressed immediately, and you mentioned or touched on this a little bit earlier, Alan, the fact that some of these businesses were forced to close. Some of them have seen reduced revenues as a result of just the pandemic, even if they've been able to stay open. Both of those things have led to lots of employees being laid off, whether it was a forced layoff or necessary in order to keep business healthy because of reduced revenues. But businesses are being charged higher unemployment insurance rates as a fact of being told that they had to lay their staff off. And we don't think that's right. So that's one of the things that we're going to begin to work on at the state level in the legislature. I hope we can get some help from our local legislators in order to address that issue. And then there will be plenty more. We've got a lot of great partners in the community, including the chamber. And I see Gary just turned his camera on and gave me a thumbs up, and I appreciate that. So we've got a lot of local partners that are fantastic, including the Chamber of Commerce. But we're going to start, checking off those boxes as soon as we can.
Excellent, thank you. And then there's a question that's asking, is there a written breakdown that the public can see that line items where and for what uses the original CARES Act funds received by the county were allocated?
Yes and no. I mean, we haven't necessarily put together a line itemed report yet. We do have all of that money accounted for, of course. One of the things that we've, again, talking about capacity issues, we've had the Department of Administrative Services at the state poking around trying to audit some of that money already, which we're happy to account for the money, but trying to perform an audit and put together a comprehensive list of, every dime that was spent during the pandemic is a little bit of a challenge. What we'd prefer to do is address the pandemic and get the vaccinations out, take care of the people, provide the resources. And then at the end of that, when we have a chance to sort of take a breath, and we'll absolutely be able to account for every dime that came in and where it was spent. I will tell you that, the original CARES Act funding had a deadline of everything had to be spent by December 31st. And as you guys, most of you probably are aware, there was some politics being played in DC with the CARES Act extension that went right up until the last remaining days and hours of 2020. And some folks were kind of holding on to that money, expecting that they were going to get an extension to the deadline. We were uncertain as to whether or not that was the case. So we worked diligently to make sure that we got all of the allocation of the CARES Act funding out the door and into the hands of local businesses and people that needed it before the end of the new year, or before the end of the old year and the beginning of the new year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so then this one is again another question that I'll try to summarize. So it's really talking about the economic future for the area, and what it is that what the county is doing as far as what they see for the future and leading us into that that economic future. Again, it sort of touched on med-ed as well. So I guess just as a generalized question, as far as economic development initiatives, I guess.
Yeah, so the county's been supportive of, economic development from every aspect, and that's a really vague question. I mean, I can't, are we supportive of the med-ed program? Absolutely. We've been there every step of the way, and we're happy to step in and help if there's an issue that requires the county's participation. As far as that goes, the question's really going to have to be a little more specific in order for me to answer it.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I apologize. I was trying to summarize it, and I did not do a great job there. So basically it's asking whether or not timber is going to continue to be the economic driver, or if you see new industries, and if so, what kinds playing a significant role.
Yeah, so that's the question that I was hoping you were trying to ask, and it's important. You talk about, someone asked a question about trying to educate people about recycling. So we've been trying to educate people in Douglas County about this timber issue for about 30 years or more, and we're still very unsuccessful being able to do so. So I hope folks will really pay attention here. Timber's not dead in Douglas County. The reason that timber is important in Douglas County is not necessarily because of the economic impact that it provides in jobs or family wage jobs or any of those things. Folks really need to understand how county government works and where county government's revenues come from, and how much of your taxes that you pay as your individual or as your business actually go to the county to provide services. Douglas County is never going to stop talking about the importance of timber revenues for a couple of very good reasons. Number one is that 52 or 3% of the landscape in Douglas County is federally owned timberland. And as a result, that land is not really productive as far as paying property taxes in Douglas County. And the county, for many, many years, received revenue into its coffers from harvesting timber on that public land. So they go out on public land, they harvest timber, the timber goes to the market, and we, the people of Douglas County, own the timber. We get the money for it. That money goes into county government and was used to provide essential services like landfills, libraries, parks, senior services, public health, and a whole host of other things. When the county stopped receiving those revenues is when you started seeing all of those services dry up and disappear. Okay, so the county is going to continue to fight that fight. The other important reason why that's necessary is because we have literally hundreds of thousands of acres of fire burning the landscape every year. Is climate change the cause? I think it's part of the cause. Part of the cause is mismanagement of the forest. The fact is that if we're in a climate change and a global warming situation and a drought situation, that there's too many trees on the landscape for the amount of water that there is available for them to drink, that makes for a fire-prone situation. Beside that, after the fires burn through there, there's billions, and I mean billions with a capital B, worth of trees that are left on the landscape to rot. Those are the very same trees that we used to cut down, haul to the mill, get revenue, provide libraries, landfills, parks, everything else with, and we'd replant that land with the money that was generated from selling the trees, and we would grow a new forest. The federal management has changed. For whatever reason, they've decided that they'd rather leave those trees there to rot. They'd rather that everyone paid more taxes in order to provide those services rather than use revenues from the renewable resource. And we're going to absolutely continue to fight that fight because it's important and it makes sense. So Aside from that, the county doesn't get a lot of revenue from industry. In other words, when someone grows blueberries and they sell their blueberries into the market, the county doesn't get a share of the revenue from the blueberries. The county doesn't get a share of the revenue for every job that's created. The county primarily collects property taxes. And there is no more property to be had. What's out there is out there, and it's paying whatever tax it's going to pay. We are very business friendly, and we are all about creating new industry and creating new jobs and helping people thrive in the community. But I also need to understand that there's a trade-off there. The more jobs that are created, the more families that move in, the more people there are to consume services, and the more services need to be provided to help those folks. And that's the work that we do. And I promise you that no one understands it better than the folks that are here doing it every day. We're happy to talk about it till we're blue in the face. And it's an extremely important question that I never get tired of answering because it's that important. So whoever sent that in, thank you for asking. And I'm sorry about the long-winded response, but that particular one always encourages me to drag out my soapbox for a minute.
No, that is great. That is great information. Thank you. So I guess the follow-up question, and this is actually not for anybody else, this is for me. What are your feelings? Are you hopeful with, because that would require a change at the national level in terms of policy on the timber harvesting or the money from that? How do you feel?
So I think the question is, are we hopeful that we're going to see positive change with the new administration? Is that what you're asking me? And I think the answer for me personally is that it's going to be a little bit too early to tell. I don't know how they're going to come out on those issues. I am going to let Commissioner Freeman or invite Commissioner Freeman to say a few words because we got some extremely important news just today that's coming from the current administration that I'd like for him to share if he feels comfortable doing so.
So thank you. We are expecting what will be some of the biggest news on the O&C land base from over the last 20 years to be out probably by Thursday this week. I can't talk about that, but what I can talk about is the recent victory of 2 federal lawsuits that O&C counties participated in, where the judge agreed that these lands are to be managed for timber production. So that work around those lawsuits and what will eventually be the remedy and new resource management plan certainly gives us hope that there will be a reasonable amount and additional amount of harvest on O&C lands. Those O&C timber receipts come to Douglas County like general fund dollars and can be used for the vital services as the budget committee and commissioners see fit. So certainly some positive news on the lawsuits and the outcome of that work, but also there's another big announcement coming in the next couple days that will dramatically change and allow for the agencies to better manage O&C lands. And that's really as far as I can go today, but thank you for bringing me into the discussion.
What do you got next, Alan?
I appreciate that. That's and I appreciate your discretion in keeping back something that sounds like it's pretty exciting. So we'll look forward to that. We are actually out of time. We have allocated all of our time, and so I do have a couple of questions that they do sort of tie into what we've already talked about. I will say I do have a couple of comments on here saying that you did a wonderful job, Commissioner Boyce. So
it's always a pleasure to be with this group of people. And it's a humbling experience to be a county commissioner. It's even more humbling to have a team that like we have in order to be able to do this work. And so I'm very grateful again for the opportunity, and thank you.
Well, and you just imagine a round of applause. It's hard to do that virtually, but you earned it.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
You as well. So again, once again, thank you, Commissioner Boyce, for presenting this year's State of the County and for your service to the community. I want to extend the Chamber's appreciation again to Avista Utilities for sponsoring today's program. I would like to close with a couple of reminders. First, if you've received the Chamber member email blast, you know that the Chamber is not holding its annual awards event in January. That event, which will actually be 3 separate events, breakfast, a lunch, and a very casual pizza and beer dinner, is tentatively scheduled for March 18th. If it needs to be pushed out due to COVID, we'll let you know as soon as we do. We are very excited about our future day-long event that will provide our members with an opportunity to network and meet with chamber leadership at a time and cost best suited for the varying membership we serve. We are, however, still accepting nominations for First Citizens, Business of the Year recognitions, and Chamber Volunteer of the Year. Those nomination forms are on the Chamber's website. One other item to note is since our monthly membership luncheon programs will be virtual until they don't have to be, the Chamber is not currently selling season passes. The Chamber has restructured its season pass program year to run September 2021 through May 2022. Season passes for that luncheon program will go on sale this summer. Finally, Oregon's legislative session for 2021 is about to begin. Your chamber is already aware of proposed legislation that it deems harmful to business. Please keep a lookout for call to action emails to add your voice to other businesses and organizations around the state to help ensure Oregon's business voice is too loud not to be heard. Thank you all for being here today and hope you all have a great week. Thank you.